do you maintain the quality checks? How do you ensure that like your investors have some level of attention? What processes do you have to implement for that? Because we're trying to scale, to the US next year. We're across Canada right now.
Welcome to the Adriana Ostapenko podcast. I'm here with a friend, Sarah Larbi. Thank you so much for joining, Sarah.
I am so happy that we got to do this, and thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's such a pleasure. Sarah and I feel like I've been following you or been following each other for quite a bit now. We've met a few times in person. We actually connected at I don't know, it was a brunch a year or so ago or a year and a half ago. I don't know. Obviously, we have a lot of friends in common as well. Sarah is a real estate investor. She's really specialized in midterm rentals right now, although she's done a number of different strategies in real estate. So very excited to talk about that. Why don't you introduce yourself to us and tell us a little bit about what your main focus is right now?
Yeah, so thanks for that intro. I'm a real estate investor. I've been doing this for 10 years now. Started in 2013 and done anything from buy and hold to the BRRRRs to conversions to commercial to residential conversions, resort, short-term, midterm, and long-term rentals. I like to dabble. But most importantly, I think it's just, some things make sense in certain areas and certain times as well along the way. I left my 9-to-5 job in 2020 and then doing this full time. In addition to the midterm rental properties company that we started, I also run a boutique resort called Inspire Beach Resorts that we have developed. And that's a whole, business on its own. And aside from that, I am still doing my podcast. Where Should I Invest? I started that one in 2017. That is what I'm still working on these days.
Very exciting. Thanks for sharing. I mean, to your point, you've done all these different things. Is there any like top strategies that you like? This one is the one that I enjoy the most, that makes most sense.
It's more about like the value add that I think over the years, right? Whether it's development or conversions or the BRRRR or, re-strategizing the rental strategy. But I think it's, everything has its price and everything has an opportunity. And so it's not, I think back in the day it was BRRRRs, but then it became, from single family BRRRRs to duplexes to, now for them to work well, you're looking at 3 to 4 units as a minimum. So I think things evolve along the way. I don't have a favorite strategy per se. I just think that, what I like to do is buy, value and good opportunities with some lift.
Yeah, that's really key because that's really where the money is made is when you add value in any way, shape, or form. It could be different ways. We've had buildings that we didn't really do any rentals, but we've increased revenue. That's enough value to make, a good BRRRR. I love that. Tell me a little bit about your resorts. You said it's a business of its own. What is it like running a resort?
It is like a whole hospitality business. Think of like Airbnb, but times 10. Inspire Beach Resort was land. Originally, it was land that we purchased that had the correct zoning for a resort. It used to be a resort 20 years ago, and then it was, so old that they just tore it down. So when we bought it, it was essentially raw land. 6 acres of it, and there was a house that had basically needed to be knocked down completely. It was such in bad shape, but we created cabins, and again, this is we're at phase 1, I think, of a five-year project, but we've got upscale cabins that we rent. But aside from that, the business piece of it is the retreats, the corporate events, those things that we offer in addition. The next phase essentially will be building a main lodge, which will have like a fitness facility in there. It'll have meeting space. It will have additional sleeping accommodations too, but just for people that are doing their corporate events there, that they can rent indoors as well. But it is a business in the sense that, a lot of people are looking for event space. And this is exactly what that is, in addition to having, sleeping accommodations. It's been fun so far. I won't lie. It's a challenge. It's especially a challenge in these tough times. And we've had to pivot a couple of times where now we are offering exclusive memberships to people. Think of yacht club, golf clubs, that kind of stuff where people are members. We're doing that, and we're providing discounts along the way and perks and opportunities for the members. And that's just, the market that we're in, right? 2 years ago, these things could rent and there'd be no days available. And today, the short-term rental market side of things and the vacation rentals, and people just don't have the same kind of disposable money that they used to have. So we've had to pivot along the way. And, there's definitely lots of ups and definitely lots of downs, just like real estate in general. This is the hospitality business, and in addition to being a real estate business.
In terms of the development side of things, like what does that look like for you guys? Are you like, planning it out, building it, the whole concept of it? Do you bring investors in?
We haven't yet. So right now it's myself, Harry James, and Joe Ferrara. So the three of us bought it together, and we've raised private money. And essentially there's just three of us investors in there. We may open it up down the road. I don't know, 100% if we're going to be opening it up to many investors. We may potentially look at one or two so that we can have the funding to build the main lodge. But so far we've kept it very, very small with the three of us. Again, pros and cons to doing that, but the purchase was done with a vendor take back, 80%, I believe, loan to value. And then the renovation was borrowing private money. And then we recently, back in May, refinanced and paid out the private lenders and went to a credit union.
Awesome. I love that. I love vendor takebacks. That just allows for an easier closing transition. You don't have to go, convince the lender to give you money for this project. Awesome. In terms of the midterm rental side of things, do you leverage that business for the resort?
No, the resort is mostly your short-term stays or your corporate memberships where people are doing events. The midterm rental business it's more like your, monthly stays. So we're really catering with that business to homeowners in transition. They sold or they bought and it doesn't line up. So they might have a couple months in between that they need a place to stay. People doing renovations, insurance claims, companies hiring staff and relocating them. So that's usually going to be the client. Which could they potentially go through the resort? Yeah, absolutely. They don't, they're complementary, but they're not, one goes with the other necessarily. But I think a lot of the people that are those executives may potentially go to the resort as well. Haven't necessarily used both like that, but could be interesting. But the midterm strategy is something. So I bought the domain a couple years prior. I just didn't have time to do anything. I just ended up buying a bunch of domains because, when you're in real estate for a while, you can kind of see sometimes the writing on the wall with the LTB and the RTA being in Ontario anyways, not getting any better. If anything, it's getting worse over time. And then the short-term rental bylaws starting to kick in, and we see more and more, and I wouldn't be surprised if it was cross country down the road with more red tape. So, that midterm 30+ day stays is that nice gray spot, and I like to play in the gray if I can, if it makes sense. That nice gray spot in between where you're still providing furnished rentals, you're still making likely better cash flow, between 1.5 to 2.5 times what you would get for your long-term rents, but you're not dealing with the bylaws. Other than, I would say, Vancouver, I believe, just did a 90 days or less definition for short term. That's, hopefully that doesn't happen everywhere, but it's still, good cash flow, maybe not as great as a short term would be. The occupancy is, obviously better because you're not turning tenants over, guests, I should say, over as often. So it's, it's a little bit less hands-on than your short-term rental, but you're making a little bit more than a long-term tenant.
Do you target or do you deal with traveling nurses or in that sector, like healthcare at all?
I went to school for nursing. I went to Ryerson. I graduated in 2008, I think 2008. Anyways, and I was going to go to the States because they pay so much better. Anyways, just long story short, traveling nurses really truly is more of an American thing where they actually have roles where you can get hired and then you are actually a traveling nurse. Do we cater here to healthcare workers? Absolutely. But it's definitely not the same market as it is in the US where they actually have jobs like that. Here it's mostly maybe doctors that come in for a couple weeks at a time, a couple months at a time, but it's very much further between than what we see in the US. Healthcare, healthcare is a little bit of a challenge to get into. Could you potentially cater to, the family of somebody who's staying, sure. But it's not, in my opinion, it's not any better or any worse than, the businesses that are in the area. Funeral homes could be another interesting one, with family coming from outside and then needing a place to stay while they get, the affairs in order. Maybe that's a month, maybe that's 2. But yeah, healthcare is not as lucrative of a industry for midterms as it is in the US.
Got it. For a homeowner, so tell me a little bit about the business model of the midterm rental. And the reason why I'm thinking that way is I'll give you an example. For ourselves, our mortgage is going up significantly at our primary residence, just like for everybody else. So we're finishing up the basement, and hoping to put, something in there. It could be a permanent tenant, someone either permanent tenant or midterm or short term potentially. We're kind of exploring our options right now. What's your business model? How do you help like homeowners, hosts, I'd say, that need to place somebody would like to leverage their home to create some additional cash flow, or their rentals for that matter?
Yeah, absolutely. So first, I will say that we are not a property management company. We don't want to get into that business. In order to scale, we want to be guest allocation. So we essentially have a team that makes phone calls to the businesses in those areas where we have properties, to the divorce lawyers in the area, to, you name it, right? So we look at different industry types, and then we actually do some outreach, and then we start working with them. And then we still advertise, elsewhere as well for the individual people, but it's obviously great to have companies coming. So, ultimately, you're going to do a hybrid, I'm assuming, right? You're going to do your own marketing. We're going to do marketing, and then we essentially bring you a guest. My personal thought is, if you live in the unit and you're going to furnish it, you're going to be there anyways, you might as well, aim for, should the bylaws not be in place for short term, maybe a mix of short and midterm. And you can cater, especially if you're a homeowner and you're renting out one of your units and you're in an area where there's lots of other homeowners. That's probably who you're going to get, is people that want to stay, in the same school zone or near their neighborhood as they're doing renovations. We get a lot of those, or as they're, moving homes and in transition. So a lot of our homeowners that, are actually just coming and staying in the same area because of that exact reason, right? In between homes, maybe some divorces, renovations, insurance claims, that kind of stuff. So, and maybe it's going to be a hybrid of, working with a company like ours that look and find guests, and, your own marketing efforts as well.
How do like homeowners get in contact with you if
Yeah.
they're looking to like rent out something?
Yeah. So they would just go to our website, which is midtermrentalproperties.com. They can fill out a form there, or they can email us info@midtermrentalproperties.com. And then our team will have an initial call with them. Again, not all houses and properties make sense. And also, we work with you to determine what a good monthly amount would be. But if it's out to lunch, we also can't help you, right? Because if you want, for example, $10,000 for a 2-bedroom, and a 3 or 4 bedroom is half that price, like, we have to, obviously let you know that your pricing is likely not going to work, as we get people with different budget types. We're going to present the ones that, make a little bit more sense. So there's also that piece as well, but there is a process we do on board. We need to make sure that there's certain things that are available, right? Including internet, and there's certain things that a lot of these guests that are in transition look for, right? So in-unit laundry is always a plus, easy parking, some kind of workspace. Many of them do work from home, fully stocked kitchens. Like, there are things that we want to make sure as a company, we have to do our quality assurance checks and that kind of stuff as well, so that we ensure that the guests, especially if they're companies that work with us, have a similar experience throughout.
Is there a specific type of property that's more ideal? Like, what would be your ideal property to be able to do a midterm rental?
If you think about these folks being more homeowners, like, basements will not do as well. That doesn't mean that we won't take a basement. Like, if if you have a basement in Burlington, like my Burlington basement is like still doing really well. You know what I mean? So it really depends.
This is a nice basement here.
Okay. All right. So that's good. So, if you're in an area where there's a lot of homeowners and there's a lot of, and there's not a lot of opportunity or supply, that would still do well. But, usually, like, newly renovated, or at least, like, something that looks nice, newer furniture is a big one. Like, you don't have to have, like for like when you think of short term, like hot tubs are a plus, like that really doesn't matter as much in your midterm stuff. But you do want to have, comfortable mattresses and beds and, just the items that people would need throughout, as they would make this home, essentially their home away from home. Yard space is always a plus as well. People like that. I allow pets in mine just because so many people don't. So it kind of differentiates you a little bit. And then you get, usually more eyeballs and interest on your places. But ultimately, location is going to be a big one. And then supply and demand, what else is in the area that people can get access to? But the cleanliness, decor, doesn't have to go be all out is also very important.
Awesome. What's the fee that you keep for doing the service?
So it is the difference between what the investor wants as their main amount per month and what the guest's budget is. So if it's $1,000, $100, $500, it really truly depends on the guest that we bring. And then your amount will be essentially fixed of what we discussed. Unless we have it, like, here's where, sometimes it changes where, let's just say you want $3,000 a month, but we have an investor whose budget is $2,800 as an example. Like we would say, do you want us to come to you to present these to you and include you? Or do you want to just not even bother being told about these other ones with like a little bit lower budget? Because some months, like right now, like November is always naturally slower. And so do you want some months to be lower than others? And sometimes the answer is yes. So sometimes we go back to investors and we say, hey, this person has a budget. This is the budget. But in order for it to work, this would have to be your amount. Do you want this or not? And some people say yes. And sometimes they just want to wait.
Makes sense because there is seasonality to short-term rentals, midterm rentals, traveling, budgets, all of it, as we know. Tell me a little bit about the business of just like building businesses. Tell me about that.
Yeah. I mean, look, it comes with like challenges and ups and downs all the time, right? Because, now you're going from real estate investing, which, believe it or not, is probably, I would say, more passive by a lot than running businesses, because you're hiring, you're training, you're having tough conversations, you are maneuvering and dealing with fires all the time. You are looking at marketing, you are looking at sales, you are looking at operations and processes and putting all the pieces together. So there's a lot. I mean, there's a lot of moving parts, and it's just a matter of, creating the processes and the systems along the way, and at the same time, figuring out the sales and the marketing side and the operation side and the staffing. The staffing has, we're definitely getting better. I think we've got a great team right now, but there were times that, finding the right people, training, hiring, keeping them at a reasonable price as well, because we're a startup, it can be very challenging. And especially in a market where when we started, I think it was just weird. There was just like not a lot of like people that wanted to work out there for what we were offering. And again, we're not starting with employees right away. We hire contractors, maybe down the road we'll switch it over. But again, if you've got a, person that you're hiring as a contractor, they might want an employee T4 income and that, they could be great. But if it's not our business model for now, then that's another thing. And then the other challenge is going to be as we get into the US onwards, it's, how do you maintain the quality checks? How do you ensure that like your investors have some level of attention? And what processes do you have to implement for that? Because we're trying to scale, to the US next year. We're across Canada right now. So it's challenges as we grow along the way.
What would you say like is a top thing that you learned or made a difference? You said we're getting better at it. What is it that you implemented, something like tactical that's really helped out?
I mean, just recently we created a sales presentation for our sales team to like specifically go over with the sales process and, just things that like, even just like how many calls you need to make for how many appointments you need to set, and how many appointments you set will give you how many sales. So I mean, I've been in sales for so long, and so it comes to me very naturally, but, taking the time to put it on paper and then train the staff on even just that as an example, processes. So, we've met somebody who is creating a whole backend system for us that should be ready in the next week or two to make things so much less manual. So like looking at, the staff's time and how much time they spend on certain things, and like how to make it so it's so much more automatic versus so much more back and forth. So that backend system will allow a lot easier processing for like when somebody is interested and they want to book it, they can do that. Now, we don't want people to be instantly booking. This is not a short-term site. And then the very reason is that we have to screen the people regardless. We have to make sure that they're not going to be squatting, that they're not tenants that are being evicted. So there's a little bit more legwork in that piece that we need to still have access to, which is there's going to be some manualness to it. But decreasing that has been a big part of what we're working on right now. And then just like shifting our marketing, right? We did a lot of marketing to investors in the beginning. We have a lot of investors. We now have to shift all our marketing efforts to more end user customers. What trade shows can we go to that are, B2B types of shows, HR types of, like where are those people going? Like, how do we get them to know more about us, the relocation companies, et cetera? Because investors, it's a good rental strategy. As an investor, I mean, I've taken some of my long-term and I've converted the ones that make sense over to midterm. It makes sense. I think it's just a matter of as we grow one arm, we got to have to make sure that the other one, and then the other challenge too. And again, there's so many challenges all the time, but because we don't fully control the calendars, sometimes we have a great guest and then they need this property. But when we say, okay, these are the properties, well, those investors, and by all means, that's how it works, say, oh, sorry, it's actually booked for the next X amount of days. So it's not available. So there's that as well. So I think we're still working on that piece, what that looks like. I don't think we want to take full ownership of the calendars because then that comes with a lot more pressure. And in order to scale, and we have a lot of investors, I don't think that's the right strategy. I still want the investors to be able to manage their own calendars and find their guests as well, just because, we all win together. And then we just deal with the challenges if sometimes things are booked at the same time and we have great guests, but it's just part of the business.
That makes sense. I understand the pressure piece because now you're responsible for fully booking them. That's a big deal, right? You probably have to pay way more attention to each individual investor versus just adding additional ones and scaling that direction. Lots of good, like so true about the business side, like hiring, training, retention, and then sales. I find sales and marketing is a lot of trial and error and experimenting until something works, and things shift too. Like sometimes you will find something that works for a certain amount of time and then there's a shift in the market, there's a change in things, and you have to adapt again and try some new things. So I fully understand the ins and outs of all of that. Are you still doing some of your BRRRR projects in real estate, or have you kind of dialed that down a little bit since, the market has shifted? Or how's your real estate portfolio doing since the market shift?
We just closed on something last week.
So you're still
we're
on
still
there.
looking. We're still buying. I mean, again, like it's better deals, I think now. But yeah, no, it's just like it's just a single family house that we bought for 480. That's going to be a 4-unit once we're done in Hamilton. But I mean, but those ones for 480 used to be 700. So like at some point it'll go back up. Like I know this market's messed up and the rates are high, but if the numbers work, the numbers work. And I think, it's just going to be about, playing the long game and having that in mind. But like we're finishing a few projects as well, like, nearing refinance, and we're still working on our 22-unit, commercial conversion. That's probably, I would say, halfway done. It's looking good, but it took 10 months to get permits. We are, we're still now we're actively in the construction part of it. It's looking a lot better, and it'll be a really cool project. And we actually just got a as complete appraisal because we had to do for the draws and stuff. And it went up, from 5.8 mil to 6.1, just by hanging out and waiting there, I suppose. But well, it's just the rents have also gone up. But I mean, that's a big project as well. So a lot of our stuff is in different phases. Like some stuff is obviously done. Some stuff is done and, we're actively screening and finding tenants. Some stuff is still in renos. Some stuff is just going through refi right now. Yeah. And then this one that we just bought last week is going to start likely next week.
That's very exciting. It is a good time to buy. Like conversations are so different now. So definitely exciting to be able to still be acquiring different challenges with like
Yeah.
financing and debt service ratios and all the other things, plus the CMHC changes on the refi side very recently. Also another challenge that got thrown in there. Have you done a lot of CMHC refinances?
No, not many. And they're definitely changing. But I think for the one that we're doing right now, because it was strictly commercial, the whole 2-year wait piece will not apply. I've been told from our mortgage broker. So that at least works in our favor. So going full commercial to full residential is better than taking something that's mixed use or residential and adding more units. Because then now you're going to be waiting a couple years for the refi.
Yeah, I think it was very purposeful to ultimately slow down the birth, and specifically on the residential side for apartment buildings. So
The government hates investors, especially this.
I have a
I mean,
theory.
it's
Mostly they want to keep all the money. That's what it is.
yeah. Well, they expect us to just provide free housing, and and I know they're like working on the GST and HST piece of it, like, but really, like, regardless, at the end of the day, there's still lots of development fees. There's still lots of parkland fees. Like those things add up very fast, and that goes back into the cost of the rent. So it is what it is. I mean, like at the end of the day, it's a cycle. I think we're gonna be, it's gonna be a rough, probably 2 years left until this current government. Again, I'm not picking sides, but I think everyone kind of knows where I stand right now, because one absolutely hates investors to the point, I think the Christia right now, just I don't know if you heard, but she's announcing that they're going to be, and again, literally this came out yesterday, so I don't know all the details about it yet, but from a short-term rental perspective, removing the tax benefits of being able to claim certain expenses. So it's going to be less and less lucrative. So I don't know how that's going to affect midterm yet. I don't know if that's going to be sweeping around, again, just extra stuff to try to, win votes, I suppose.
Navigates.
Yeah.
So you started, like, you kind of hinted on there. What's your prediction for what's happening in the next little while in the real estate world?
I mean, I think that the next 2 years are going to be rough, and I think they're going to be tough. And I think unless they start bringing rates down as mortgage renewals start coming back, people are going to have to sell and rent. I don't know where they're going to go. Maybe midterm, I don't know. But and they're pushing a lot of investors out of the market. And so I think the ones that have the ability to stay will be rewarded really well. But I think it's going to take a couple years to go through, like finish with this government, hopefully, and have somebody else come in and, have more opportunity for incentives to develop and to add more units, more so than we are now. I think they're just starting now, but again, a little bit too late. I mean, I'm in it for the long game. Like, is this year rough? Absolutely. Doing lots of cash calls on things for sure. Most of my stuff is variable. I had 2 that were fixed that renewed anyways, but there's many things that do really well still. And there's many things that I'm cash calling, right? And so, and I think that's the reality of what we need to know. This is not, this is not all upside. It is not all easy. And there's going to be some times where you're putting money into these deals and you're feeding them for a few months at a time to, stabilize, and parts of your portfolio might still be doing okay. So you can balance parts of it out. But, yeah, absolutely. This is rough. Am I sitting on the sidelines? I mean, not necessarily. If there's a good deal that can do well and offset some of the deficit, I'll jump right in and get those ones, right? Sometimes you can mitigate some of the cash flow loss by adding, new opportunities that may actually do well from a cash flow standpoint. But yeah, people are hurting. People are, just trying to figure out what to do. I think that's totally normal in a time like this. And, and the cash flow is just not where it used to be. The cash flow from short term is for a while it's been saturated, and for a while things have kind of been more quiet on the platforms like Airbnb and whatnot. But you've got to, if you have some staying power that you can say, okay, I'm going to work through this for the next year or two, then I think once that, couple of years from now, we'll be looking back and like happy that we held on to what we held on to, even though there's a bunch of pain along the way.
I very much agree with that. I think, it is time to hold on. You don't sell when it's at its lowest. And that's, just the whole concept of investing. We've had such a good market for so long. It felt like it was going to continue. It will always be like that. It felt when you're experiencing forever positive news, you just assume that it will continue to be the case, even though logistically we all know that there's a cycle to it. It's a very different stage now, but it is time to hold on. We kind of all knew this was going to happen at some point. Focus on cash flow right now. This is a time, and that's active businesses, that's additional strategies. Like we talked on your podcast, how do you make your we went through all of our rentals, saw where things were at, and started being creative about how do we add income, how do we cut expenses. We moved utilities to the tenant on a few of our units to make sure that we had more cash flow. So just adjusting to hold on until we can, look back and be on an upper market again at some point. And like you said, they're pushing investors back and out of the country, not of investing around here. So starting to look down in the US where there's different rules, different opportunities, which is unfortunate. I love Canada. I want to continue to invest here, but it's kind of like feels like a little harder than it has to be.
Yeah, no, I agree. But I also, don't think that the grass is that much greener on the other side per se either, right? So like, I think it's going to be a mix of both. Like I'm starting to look out a country, but I'm also looking and still buying in Ontario because I still think that the fundamentals make sense. But yeah, it's pushing a lot of people out. It's pushing a lot of investors out because at the end of the day, if you piss someone off enough and they don't want to be in it for the long run and they just want to move their cash out, then that's just one less rental property for somebody. So that's going to make the rents much higher because there's going to be less and less inventory. But I don't think it's going to last for the long term. And I also don't think that the US, like sure there's less rules and regulations, but the appreciation that we can get in a place where there's no vacancy, even though it's higher, I still think that there's upside there, even, for the long term. For short term, I think it's going to be a crapshoot, I think, in most places, wherever you go. But, then this goes back to what we talked about in the beginning is creating value. If you can take something and your price is low enough versus where you would have been 2 years from now, and you can push up the value in some capacity, I think that's still a good opportunity to do that. But again, I don't blame investors that are looking outside the country either.
Yeah, for sure. I do think that we tend to think the grass is greener on the other side. So what your point is, ultimately, there's a huge learning curve on a new market, on a new country, taxation, regulations, all of it. And until you kind of hone in your systems anywhere you start investing, still a lot of learning and still may or may not work. You're experimenting and trying things and see what sticks too. What would you say, in like coming towards the end here, what would you say what will be your top advice to investors at this time that we're going through?
I mean, this is the downside of, maybe 5-6+ years of upside, and it'll happen again. So, we'll come out of it. I think it's just a matter of like, stay the course, figure out if you're in negative cash flow. There are mortgage brokers that have the ability to actually help, like Streetwise Mortgages. They have a new program they've just talked to me about. I don't know if, it's 100% out there yet, but to help with the deficit of the cash flow. National Bank came up with some opportunities for the mortgage plus improvement option where like they'll fund the renovations as an example. So like, some there's still some creative opportunity. I think there is a time today that we didn't have from a negotiating standpoint, potential VTB standpoint that we didn't have prior to that either. So in every market, there's opportunities. And so what is the opportunity? And then the other piece is like, look at what you currently have and see if you can do something to create more upside, more units, more rents, change the rental strategy. The student market used to be saturated. Now it's actually quite, interesting, which has some upside. So, look at where we're at and take advantage of the opportunity. Because I think in a down market, that's truly where, many people will unfortunately take a step back, but the very few that move forward can actually do quite well. And again, this is a long-term play.
I love that. Last question for you. If you had the world's attention for 30 seconds, what message would you share with everybody?
I think real estate is all about mindset. I think it's, everybody likes winning. People can't handle losing. You truly get to know how people are in times like these, and I think, and who your friends are, which are great. And you need this to appreciate the good as well. But I think it's just going to be about staying power and mindset and what you're doing along the way, because right now I think the mindset, of people whether they're in real estate investing, business entrepreneurs, is not where it used to be, right? For the past 10 years or so. And it's just, what are you doing to work on that every single day to, stay sane, to, enjoy life regardless of the ups and downs. And financially is, your financial is just a number at the end of the day, your finances, right? And I think ultimately don't cave and throw in the towel and decide that all of a sudden, real estate sucks and I'm out. It comes back and you'll regret it down the road. Trust me. You just have to stay the course and you have to stay strong along the way to do it. And what are you working, and what are you doing every single day? And if you're being, bombarded by news and the negativity and listening to the radio and people that are negative around you, like you got to find a way to shut that off.
I love that. Mindset is everything. You really create your whole reality. And it all starts here. It starts how you see things, the thoughts that you choose to think, the conversations you choose to have. Are you filled with negativity and fear and concern and anxiety all day, every day? Or are you filled with hope and opportunity and optimism and joy and gratefulness? It's really a choice. And that does create your reality and where you're going from here. Thank you, Sarah. It was so nice having you here. It's always so fun talking to you. Look forward to connecting again soon in the future.
Thanks very much. Thanks for having me on.
Where can people find you?
They can go to my website, which is sarah@sarahlarbi.com, my Instagram, which is investor Sarah Larbi, or check out the midterm rental property website, which is midtermrentalproperties.com, or inspirebeachresort.com if they want to know more about the boutique resort.
I love that. Thank you so much. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks.